Sounds good. All right, perfect. So we will go ahead and start. This right here is a live reaction to Roastful's top 100 coffee roasters list. So this is my first time seeing this list. I only have a couple of spoilers, but I am also looking forward to hearing back from you guys. Now, I scrolled all the way down to the methodology. So the quick spoilers that I do know that Tim Wendelboe is number one. Kyle reached out to me and told me that September is on this list, but not in the top 50. Pepe also spoiled for me that Colfea Circular isn't on this list. And there was one more thing. Howard told me Hart went from 10th place to 16th place. But yes, let's read this methodology real quick so it gives people a chance to join this live stream. And it says it's subjective nature, so even my reaction and everybody else's reaction is going to be subjective. Let's see here, panel selection, okay. And one of the complaints I had last year was that they didn't have enough worldwide coffee roasters. So it looks like this time they're trying to include more national coffee roasters. So I'm going to see how that turns out. But let's see here, geographic distribution, the process. So we asked each panel member to rank their top 25 coffee roasters using a point system. We assigned 25 for a first place vote, 24 for second, and so on. So 300 roasters received votes. And let's see here, the margins were thin. Top roasters received high rankings from multiple panel members. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. Let's see here. All right, and first, I guess we are taking a look at the panelists here. So we have an anonymous roaster from the West Coast. We have a member of Roastful. We have Blendin Coffee Co.'s, it looks like National Brewers Cup champion. We have Asylum Coffee House out of Singapore. Okay, so at least one international coffee roaster. And then we have the Naughty Dog, Petra from the Czech Republic. See here, a Brazilian owner. So that's interesting right there. Hopefully we'll get more South American coffee roasters because I don't think there was a single South American coffee roaster last time. Let's see here, we have a German coffee roaster from Silo. So Good Coffee from Indonesia. Okay, more Asian representation. UAE, so from the Arab world, we have at least one. The team from Luna, so that's exciting. And we have Australia. Okay, so this looks like better representation at least. And I should say that most of the feedback I've heard has been pretty negative, so I'm hoping that it's not as bad as everybody says. But let's keep going. So we've got the team at Karasu. We've got a member of Araya. Let's see here, Brewman Tokyo, so some Japanese representation outside of just weekenders. Somebody from Ethiopia, so we have somebody from one of the actual origins. The Philippines, Good Cup. Okay, I keep meaning to try Good Cup, so hopefully that will happen sometime here in the near future. Morgone is featured this time. If I remember correctly, they finished second place last year. Acid out of Spain. Let's see here, we have a coffee farm from Colombia. Okay, Australia. Christopher Farron from Aviary. That's exciting. I do want to try Aviary's coffee sometime soon. It just seems to sell out so quickly. Momo's from South Korea. And we have Moncler in France. And we have Father Coffee. I do remember they were on the list last year. We have it's Yeribia from Mexico. And I do want to try some more of their coffees as well. Let's see here. Rowan. I believe Rowan was on the panel last year. We have Pico Caja from Ecuador, which is exciting. Turkey. The Coffee Vine. Okay, so Alex from Coffee Vine. I do have some coffees that we're going to be reviewing from the Coffee Vine here in the near future. And let's see here. We have another South Korean representation. Cafe Roastery. Okay, so that's our panel. Let's go ahead and get into this list. And I'm guessing that all of these coffee roasters are, they said 100. So I do believe that this is all going to be all of the 100, and then they're going to rank them from that point going forward. So we'll probably run through this real quick. So we have Zest out of Melbourne, have not tried them. Workshop, that's kind of interesting. I don't recall from last year's list. I think Workshop's fine. Let's keep going. Weekenders. So I imagine Weekenders is probably going to finish pretty high on this list because they finished very high on the list last year. This time around, though, I have tried their coffee, so I do have more of an opinion on them. Tim Wendelboe. Okay, I know Tim Wendelboe is first place, and I do know that they were first place last year too. Three Marks out of Barcelona. Okay, not the biggest fan of Three Marks. The Underdog, a Greek coffee roaster. Don't have any familiarity with Greek coffee roaster. Let's see here. Gonna take a quick look at our comments here. Hello from Seoul. Hello back. And I did see from EB Coffee Onyx was ranked a little high, but yeah, we'll see. Hello to everybody. Thanks for confirming that the sound is good. Let's keep going. The Naughty Dog from the Czech Republic. Don't have any familiarity with them. The Barn, okay. I've said in the past that I do think the Barn is on the better side of things. I just am not the biggest fan of the Barn for various other reasons. Let's see here. Is that Terroir Laboratory out of Melbourne? Okay, more Australian representation. Tres de Cafe from Paris. Don't have any familiarity with them yet. Terrar Osa from South Korea. And I have wanted to try some more South Korean coffee roasters. We do have some South Korean reviews coming up, but don't have any familiarity with them specifically. Tandem out of Portland, Maine. Okay, interesting. Swirl out of Falkenborg. And I've tried a fair bit of Tandem, and I tried Swirl for the first time this past year, and it was mostly some experimental coffee. So I wasn't the biggest fan of those coffees, but I've heard a lot about them. Subtext. So I was actually quite impressed with the coffees that we had from Subtext recently. So I'm happy to see them on the list. I think they probably belong in the top 50. Substance. I do want to review Substance here in the near future, and hopefully it'll happen. I'm waiting for somebody that is very familiar with Substance to kind of tell me which coffees they're releasing that are supposed to be really, really good. So that way, when I do place an order, I can just review some of their better offerings. All right, Style out of Kyoto. Well, it's unfortunate I never heard of them, because when I was in Kyoto, it would have been a great opportunity to try them out. Standout out of Stockholm, Sweden. I'm not the biggest fan of Standout. Their coffees were a little interesting. They do tend to offer some very interesting experimental out there coffees. Square Mile out of London. So, of course, James Hoffman's roastery. And I like Square Mile. They're usually better than I expect every time I try them. Special Guests, I've seen some of their coffees, have not tried them, don't have any familiarity with them. Small Batch and Single O, 2 Australian coffee roasters. It is really nice to see a lot of Australian representation over here. So that's exciting. Simple Kappa out of Taiwan. We are going to be reviewing a Taiwanese-based coffee roaster here in the near future. It's not that one, but exciting to see more Asian representation as well. Say out of Brooklyn, that was obviously going to make it. 7 Seeds. I've heard a fair bit about them, yet to try them. September, I mentioned I knew that they were going to be on this list. So happy for Kyle and the team at September. And I know they're not on the top 50 this year, but I imagine it's maybe because people don't have as much familiarity with them. I do think that they're very nice. All right, Round Hill. A little bit of familiarity with them. Rosso, not much familiarity with them. And then Rose, I've reviewed a couple of coffees from Rose, and I do want to try some more of their coffees, but they also tend to offer some more experimental offerings. Proud Mary. I've had a lot of experience with Proud Mary, all of the Portland versions of it, though. I've never had anything from Melbourne. I don't know if they're any different. Either way. Prologue. I've actually had a couple of coffees from Prologue. They're not necessarily my favorite, but interesting there. Prodigal. Okay, I imagine that might be a little controversial, but some people either really love Prodigal or not the biggest fan. Process. I was not the biggest fan of Process when I did try them. Philo, Kofea, and that's another Japanese coffee roaster. I tried them. They were at the Coffee Village in Tokyo during SCA Japan, I believe. I do recall their name. Passenger, I expect they're probably going to place pretty high as well. Onyx, and yeah, that's kind of interesting. I heard Onyx is placing pretty high on this list, so we'll see how high they place. Onibus, I really liked their cafe in Tokyo. They were some of the nicest people I had met in the entire time I was in Japan. Let's see here. A Malaysian coffee roaster, One Half. I've never heard of them before. Curious about them. Ona, another kind of controversial coffee roaster, but they're on our suggestion recommendation list, and I feel like they're going to be easier to access than some other coffee roasters. Let's see here. 1 second. All right. Oma out of Hong Kong, and another Asian coffee roaster I don't know if you're familiar with. Nylon, same thing. That one out of Singapore. Obviously, there are some Singaporean-based coffee roasters that are very popular, not necessarily. Well, I hadn't heard of that one anyway. Nomad at Barcelona, Spain. So Nomad has grown on me ever since the first time we reviewed them. Wasn't the biggest fan of them initially, but they've definitely grown on me. I do like some of their coffees a lot. Morgone, again, second place finisher. I assume they're probably going to be in the top 10 again this year. Monogram, I actually like Monogram. I think they're fine. They've been around for a while, so I think that they're probably a top 100 coffee roaster. Momos out of Busan. Reviewed a couple of their coffees already, and again, expecting to review some more in the future. Eau Claire, I've seen their coffees at a number of coffee shops too, and I've had mixed feelings on wanting to try them, mostly because they haven't offered anything that I really want to try, but maybe in the future. All right. And yeah, if the stream quality is kind of capped, I do apologize. I am basically just using my webcam, so I know it's not necessarily the best quality in terms of the video, but it was kind of a last moment thing because a lot of people were kind of spamming me with spoilers on this list, and I wanted to go into this list as unaware of everything on it as possible. All right. Mock out of Brussels, Belgium. We've reviewed a number of their coffees. They usually end up a little better than I was expecting going into them, so I do like Mock. Market Lane, and same thing with Market Lane. We've reviewed a number of their coffees. I've heard mixed things from people in Australia about Market Lane. Some people think that they're maybe a little overrated, but coffees I've had have been fine. Manhattan, that's an interesting one. I don't think they made the top 10 last year, so I'm wondering if they're going to make the top 10 this year because I feel like they've grown in popularity since last year, interestingly enough. All right. Mame, Zurich, Switzerland. So I actually met the owners in SEA Japan, so I do have a bit of familiarity with their coffees. I tried one of the Jansen coffees when I was out there, so that was nice. Luna out of Vancouver, Canada, one of my favorite Canadian coffee roasters. Happy to see them on the list. They are on the panel, of course. Lilo out of Osaka, and I'm disappointed I didn't get to swing by and try them when I was in Kyoto, but I didn't have enough time for that one. Hopefully we will get a chance to. Leaves, and I like Leaves. I've had some mixed experiences with some of the coffees, but for the most part, I do tend to enjoy them. La Cabra, and last year they placed on the top 10, and I was really surprised by that placement. I'm wondering if they will still remain on that top 10. I'm not a big fan of their coffee. Kurasu out of Kyoto, Japan. And I actually met the owner of Kurasu. I have a photo with him, so maybe at some point I will post that. But yeah, very nice guy, and I really like their coffee shops. Kopi out of Helsingborg, Sweden. I remember that they were pretty high last year. Let's see, they were number 4. So we'll see how they place this year. KB out of Paris, France. Never heard of them before. Kawa, have a lot of familiarity with Kawa. Have kind of mixed feelings on some of the coffees, mostly because usually what I try from them is some very experimental out there coffees. All right, Cafolix, and I've heard about them, and actually I might be trying some of their coffees here in the near future. Actually, I am going to be trying one of the coffees. So shout out to Airworks Coffee because they're bringing in an Ecuadorian coffee that I'm going to be trying from them here soon. Intelligentsia, so obviously one of the more iconic coffee roasters, and Ilsa. A lot of people really like Ilsa. I have had mixed reactions to them, but they're probably a top 100 coffee roaster. Homeground out of Singapore, another coffee roaster I don't have familiarity with. And now that I'm looking at it, Mood Trap was not on this list, which is interesting to me. Okay, let's keep going. Hex out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I've met the owner of Hex, and they were actually awesome. So I really like Hex, and we haven't reviewed too many of them, but they've also kind of skewed a little more on the experimental side of things. Heart, and I know that they're 16th, not necessarily my favorite coffee roaster. I liked them a lot back in the day. I feel like a lot of people did, but I think they've mostly kind of stuck to what they do and know best. Hatch out of Markham, Canada. I do want to try some more Hatch here in the near future. Let's see, Mood Trap is too small probably and not accessible. That's probably the case. I imagine that a lot of people on this panel haven't tried too many of Mood Trap's coffees. So Hatch, yeah, I do need to try one of their higher end offerings. Back in the day, I really wanted to try that Tanzanian Gesha, and I'm really disappointed I never got a chance to, and they haven't released it since. All right, Glitch out of Tokyo, Japan. I honestly wasn't the biggest fan of the coffee when I was out there, and I'm not entirely sure how to explain it. It's the second time that I've actually been out to their cafe in 2 different years and really didn't enjoy their coffee as much as most other people do. The Picky Chemist also not on here. Yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that, but the Picky Chemist is such a huge fan favorite that I feel like if you were polling a lot of people that have familiarity with some of those coffee roasters like that, the Picky Chemist is probably going to be placing very high for so many people. Gardelli out of Forlì, Italy, and I have had a number of their coffees, mostly single cup coffees, and I've heard mixed things from people, but I think that they're good. They're fine. Fuglin out of Oslo, Norway. I've been to their cafe in Tokyo as well, and not necessarily my thing. I think that they're fine. Yeah, so many people. The Picky Chemist. I figured Picky Chemist is extremely popular. All right, Fruit. really like fruit, and the review that we're releasing tomorrow is actually going to be a fruit review, one of my more enjoyed coffees from them. Fritz out of Seoul, South Korea. And shout outs to Carl, who was at Fritz, I want to say today, technically. And I've been to their cafe before. They're a little bit more developed than I like, but they're still nice. Fried Hats, Amsterdam, Netherlands. And we've reviewed a lot of Fried Hats coffees. There are a number of them that I've very much enjoyed. They also do offer a lot of experimental coffees too. So interesting coffee roaster there. Flower Child. Congratulations to Flower Child. I do not believe that they were on last year's list, and they're one of the newer coffee roasters. So congratulations to them. Medium dark. Yeah, that sounds great. All right. Fjord out of Berlin, Germany, and Five Elephants also out of Berlin, Germany. I have a lot of familiarity with Five Elephants and have never tried anything from Fjord. I think Five Elephants is fine. It's just been a very long time since I've had them. Fathers out of Ostrava, Czech Republic. And I was big on Fathers last year when they were still roasted on the Diedrich. They had some really enjoyable coffees, and some of the coffees I've had from them since have still been pretty nice. Drop, Stockholm, Sweden. And back in the day, I was a bigger fan of Drop. They offered some really interesting and exciting coffees. Haven't enjoyed them as much recently, but they're probably still a 100 coffee roaster. Double Shot out of Prague. I've actually been trying to get my hands on some of their coffees, maybe here in the near future. I do know some people out in Prague for that as well. Dita, how do you say that? Artigianelli? Nale? Sorry for the pronunciation, but yeah, out of Florence, Italy. And I've seen their coffees. I believe it's Kumquat that offers their coffees. I've just never tried any of them. Dark Art out of London, UK. We actually reviewed one of their coffees a long, long time ago. And I was actually at their coffee shop in, I think it's near Sushi. It's either Sushi or near Sushi in Japan. The people there were very nice. Apparently we did a cupping together and I didn't even know it. Hey, Greg. Let's keep going. Doc out of Amsterdam, Netherlands. And I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. Doc's extremely popular now. And they offer the entire spectrum. They have some very experimental and out there coffees, but also some interesting regular processed coffees. Cupping Room out of Hong Kong. Weirdly enough, there was a coffee roaster that I had a coffee shop once upon a time that used the Cupping Room as their main coffee. So I've actually tried a number of the coffees as well. Will this be available to watch later? I'm hoping to make it available to watch later as well for anybody that might have missed this one. All right, Kelowna out of Bristol, UK, and I've tried one of their coffees. I do want to try some more of their coffees here in the future. Not necessarily the easiest to access. All right, Coffee County out of Kurume, Japan. I really liked Coffee County. They were one of the surprises when I went out to Japan, and I really want to try some more of their coffees in the future as well. So that's really exciting. All right, Coffee Collective out of Denmark, and that's not surprising. I think that they finished pretty high last year too. They finished 9th place, so pretty good coffee roaster. Oh, Café Circular. Okay, so I heard that Ivica didn't make this list. I heard that from somebody, and that was really surprising to me. But yeah, they're on this list, at least in terms of the top 100. So that's a surprise to me because I didn't think they would be. All right. Code Black out of Brunswick, Australia. And I've heard a lot about Code Black as well, so hoping to try their coffees here in the future. Whereas Leuchtfeuer, you are right. They are also not on this list. And I think that that's an oversight too, because as far as German coffee roasters go, I really like their coffees too. So that's kind of a surprise. All right, let's see here. Doc Honeygesha, best coffee I've had in a long time. Yeah, a lot of people really like so many of Doc's coffees. So it's not surprising that they're on this list. Cat and Cloud. And that's kind of an interesting one. I wonder how many people put that one on the list. I'm not the biggest fan of Cat and Cloud, but yeah, it's fine. Calendar out of Galway, Ireland. And I do remember that they were on the panel last year. They placed pretty high last year, but I really like Calendar. They're a very enjoyable coffee roaster. All right, let's see here. The Barn better than Café Circular. That's, it's an interesting thought because yeah, there have been some coffees I've had from the Barn that were really impressive. Bots out of Whiting, Indiana. That's another interesting one. I feel like just a couple years ago, people weren't too familiar with Bots, but they really seemed to kind of explode in the last year or so. So congratulations to Danny. That's exciting. All right, Bonanza out of Berlin, Germany. Not the biggest fan of the coffees that I've had from them up to this point. There are a lot of German coffee roasters on this list. Another one, Thankfully Coffee. I feel like Thankfully Coffee is also in that same realm where they're not necessarily the biggest, most well-known coffee roaster, but they actually, I like the coffees I've had from them so far, and they're very nice people. So maybe here in the near future, Bots totally deserves it. Yeah, really. Congratulations to Danny on that. BOB Coffee Lab or Bob Coffee Lab out of Bucharest, Romania. Don't have any familiarity with them. Blendin Coffee Club out of Sugarland, Texas. I will say this since we are live on stream. I wanted the decaf to win that poll, but it finished last place in both polls. I've heard from a number of people that that is really good. And since we opted for the other two decafs, I'm just kind of curious how that one turned out. I think I might get a sample of it anyway, but they also had some coffees I was interested in trying, so it's a little unfortunate. All right, let's see here. I'm relatively new to specialty coffee. Surprised Regalia hasn't made the list. Yeah, I'm also surprised now that you mentioned that. So it's really nice that I have you guys giving me feedback on this because I'm going through these coffee roasters and realizing that places like that aren't even mentioned on this list. So it is really unfortunate because we've only reviewed one coffee from Regalia, but I feel like they are definitely coffee roasters, probably in the top 100. Regalia is one of my favorites. Yeah, I can see that. All right, Black and White. And it's been, I want to say we reviewed one coffee from Black and White last year, but outside of that, it's been a while. I really liked Black and White once upon a time. A lot of the coffees they have now are just way too experimental for me. So yeah, not necessarily my favorites. Axel out of Melbourne, Australia. I believe that they're on our suggestion recommendation list. So hopefully here in the near future, got 2 bags of Regalia waiting to get into them. Yeah, so I've seen a number of their coffees that I wanted to try as well. So hopefully we'll try more of them in the future. Assembly, it's been a while since I've had anything from Assembly. They're very British, to say the least. Artisafer out of Sydney, Australia. I don't have any familiarity with them. We do need to step up the amount of Australian coffee roasters we review. They just need to become more easily accessible to us. Archetype, Omaha, Nebraska. And we've actually read a couple of Archetype's coffees, and I've liked their coffees for the most part. So good for them. Archers, that's actually really exciting. And Archers has that very special Pepe set right now. And it's the first United Arab Emirates coffee roaster that we've ever reviewed. And they are very nice people. After the reviews, they reached out to us and thanked us. So if there's anybody in that part of the world that's looking for a coffee roaster, I do suggest Archers. April, Copenhagen, Denmark. And April is very good. The last experience I had with them was very nice. It was that Esmeralda coffee. So a little bit of background noise there. Apollon's Gold, Tokyo, Japan, and Apollon's Gold is one of my favorite coffee roasters. They weren't on the list last year, and I'm very happy to see them on the list this year. All right, Amor Perfecto, Bogota, Colombia, and first, I think this is the first South American coffee roaster I've seen on this list. So that's really exciting. Good for them. Hopefully we'll get to try some South American coffee roasters. I've tried Stinto from Pepe Hon, and even though we're not going to be reviewing that, it was really nice to try a coffee that was roasted at origin. A Matter of Concrete out of Rotterdam, Netherlands. And we reviewed one of their coffees recently, going to be reviewing another one here in the future. I've heard a lot of positive things about them as well. And last, we have 20 grams coffee roastery out of Singapore and familiarity with them. All right, here we go. Top 50 time. And where's 50th? Okay, so we don't have a 50th place coffee, but I guess they're tied in 49th. So Bots at 49, tied with one half at 49. So that's even more exciting for Dan. So that's huge to go from not even on the list last year to now in the top 50. And so many people really like Bots. That's really exciting for Danny. And I even said that they're on the better end of coffee roasters in our most recent coffee roaster tier list. So I'm just really happy for Danny in that regard. Karasu at 48. Wow, I find that to be really, really low. I imagine, especially if they were on the panel, then they might have been higher. So that to me seems a little low. I'm curious what they've got higher than that. Swirl at 47. Okay, and hopefully we'll try more coffees from Swirl. If they're in the next advent calendar, then we'll probably try some more of their coffees. But 47, I don't have enough familiarity with them to say one way or another. Subtext at 46, that also feels a little low to me. And so many people had been telling me how good Subtext was. And it really lived up to the expectations when we tried them. So I think that they're probably higher than that. Let's keep moving on. Black and white at 45. Okay. As I've kind of mentioned, not necessarily the biggest fan of black and white coffees recently. In the past, I enjoyed them a little more, but I do think I'd probably put everything that I have familiarity with about black and white for myself personally. I mean, this list is all subjective, but that's just how I feel. Hatch at 44. I really want to try some more of Hatch's coffees. I can't really say one way or another about them. Monogram at 43. I mean, I mentioned Monogram's nice. I've enjoyed some of their coffees in the past, so 43 is fine for me. Philo Kofea, don't have enough familiarity with them. I don't even remember the coffee that I tried from them when I was out in Japan, but I'm curious to try some more of their coffees here in the future. I did make some nice connections in Japan while I was out there too, so it should be easier for me to get some of these Japanese coffee roasters that may not necessarily ship to the United States. The Barn at 37. So I'm guessing a bunch of these coffee roasters are tied around the spot. Let's see here. Yeah, so Rose, Tandem, The Barn, Oma. Luna. Okay, that's a lot of coffee roasters tied at 37. Let's kind of break this down. All right. This is a wide range of coffee roasters too. They all seem so different for a number of reasons. And yeah, we have Canadian, American, a couple of European, and an Asian coffee roaster. I feel like the Barn does seem a little low, if I'm being completely honest. They probably do deserve to be higher. And I feel like the same with maybe Rose and Luna. I don't have too much familiarity with Oma, and Tandem's fine, but it's kind of interesting that they all scored in that same spot. I'm guessing that a lot of people might have not put some of these coffee roasters higher on their list because either they don't have familiarity with them or they just don't like the coffee roaster for whatever reason. All right. Let's see here. Hydrangea is a surprise for sure. Yeah, actually, and I didn't expect Hydrangea to be on this list, mostly because they're also newer, and I don't necessarily think that they're the most coffee roaster out there yet. Instento is pretty interesting. Yeah. Rogue Wave, Hydrangea, Lil Wolf, Moonwake. Rogue Wave, that's actually kind of a surprise to me. I feel like there are enough people that have familiarity with Rogue Wave to put them pretty high on their own list. Hydrangea, yeah, that seems to be a consensus. I think maybe people that have tried Hydrangea really seem to like them. I saw somebody list them as one of their 5 favorite coffee roasters in the world with some really heavy hitters. Let's see here, Little Wolf. Yeah, that's actually a surprise now that I think about it too. They probably deserve to be on there. And Moonwake is small still, I feel like, so that doesn't surprise me that they're not necessarily on this list. Subtext is great. Let's see here, Columbia Gesha and Abel Salinas. I really wanted to try that Abel Salinas. I just couldn't find enough coffees from them that justified a purchase. All right, let's keep going. Proud Mary at 36. Okay. Again, I've never tried the Australian version. I don't know if it's any different than the Portland version, but 36, I don't have enough to say. Gardelli at 34. And, they carry some very interesting coffees as well. So I don't have any huge issue with that. Calendar at 34. Wow, that is a huge drop. They went from 3rd place to 34th. And I feel like that's a little harsh because I like Calendar, and I'm actually working on a Calendar coffee right now, and there is no way that they're the 34th best coffee roaster. I was fine with their placement last year. That just seems really harsh. I think they deserve to be a lot higher than that. 5 Elephant. I definitely think Calendar is better than 5 Elephant, and a number of coffee roasters. Well, 5 Elephant's good, but I'm just really surprised at Calendar's placement on this list. All right, Rosso Coffee Roasters out of Calgary. Don't have familiar with them. Weekenders also dropped. Weekenders was, 7th last year? And since their placement, I tried them and I was really impressed by their coffee. So I actually felt like maybe their spot was a little bit more justified because I tried a number of coffees while I was out there. That seemed really, really low. That's an interesting drop for them. I think maybe since the panel is a lot bigger now, there are more people that are voting on these top coffee roasters this last time around, where people from Calendar, Weekenders were on the panel, so that might have impacted it. It still seems like such a surprise that both of them dropped as much as they did. Hex at 29. Okay, I like Hex, but I have a very hard time justifying Hex's placement above some of these other coffee roasters, including Calendar. Calendar right now seems like the biggest issue I have among these coffee roasters. Leuchtfeuer is amazing. I love their Figa de Bora. It's amazing. Yeah, they are really nice, and that's why it's surprising they didn't even end up on the top 100. They might be another one of those coffee roasters that isn't well enough outside of maybe like a little bit of a cult following, but I think that they do justify being higher. A way to get weekenders coffee in these states. I don't know of any. As mentioned, I do have a connection, so hopefully I'll be able to try some more of their coffees. I've heard that they don't ship outside of Japan. I don't know if that's true. I feel like it's one of those things where unless you do know somebody in Japan that can send you those coffees, it might be difficult to get them. All right, Drop at 29. As mentioned, I've really liked some of Drop's coffees in the past. They're one of the coffee roasters on this list that had a coffee finish in our top 5 coffees of the year. So they've had some really good coffees in the past. I've had mixed feelings on them in the last couple of years. Assembly out of London, UK. That does seem a little high. I know that they're like very well known. They've been around for a very long time. One of the more well-known London-based coffee roasters. It just seems a little high. Ilsa at 27. All right. I know Ilsa's really, really popular, and it's interesting to me that so many people voted it as high as they did. I just think that on a side-by-side comparison with some other coffee roasters I've had that have offered the same coffees, I've just enjoyed other coffee roasters' versions of them better. Right, Glitch at 26. That seems really high to me. I wonder if maybe we did full bag reviews of any of their coffees because just the experiences I had with them, all the experiences I had with them, and I tried multiple coffees when I was out at the coffee shops. I just didn't really seem to like too many of them that much. Right, let's see here. Square Mile at 24. That's an interesting placement, and it's tied with Passenger, which is also an interesting placement. As far as London-based coffee roasters go, I mean, I think it's probably going to be Square Mile. I do remember when I was out in London, Square Mile was everywhere. You couldn't go to like a couple of coffee shops and not find Square Mile at one of them at least. So obviously very popular, very well known. Every time I have them, they're a little better, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. Let's see, I haven't had a consistent experience with Ilsa, unfortunately. And that's why it's kind of surprising to me that maybe they're as high as they are, but I'm not entirely sure. It might be based off popularity, as you said. All right, Passenger at 24, and they also dropped a fair bit. I believe that they were fifth last year, so that seems also harsh. They're one of my 10, they're one of my 5 favorite coffee roasters. Though they haven't offered too many exciting things recently, I think that they're still one of the top 10, if not top 5 best coffee roasters out there. Let's see here, not giving anything away, but it's kind of whack. Okay, well, I appreciate not spoiling anything. Let's keep going. Mame at 22, and I don't think I have enough experience to say one way or another about their coffee. I've had mixed experience with them overall. Okay, no spoilers, Aaron. All right, well, at least I know that much now. Let's keep going. Code Black at 22. I don't have familiarity with them. Kelowna at 21. That's a surprising placement for me based off the one and only coffee I've had, but maybe their other coffees are better. I feel like the British coffee roasters are scoring very, very high on this list. All right, let's keep going. Market Lane at 20, and that does seem a little high to me based off of what I've heard from Australians, because I've never heard from an Australian that Market Lane is the best coffee roaster out in Australia, so might be a little high. Prodigal at 19. That's interesting. I feel like you're in one of two camps. You either think Prodigal is the greatest coffee roaster ever, or you're not necessarily the biggest fan. So I'm wondering if it might have been skewed by some really high votes from them. All right, Leaves at 18, and that right now is the highest placing Japanese coffee roaster. I do like Leaves. I think that maybe my experience with Weekenders was better. My experience with Apollon's Gold is better. So 18, I think, is maybe a good spot for them, honestly. I like Prodigal. Yeah, and a lot of people really do enjoy Prodigal. The last coffee we had from Prodigal was nice. We do have another Prodigal review coming up too, which is also nice. But I think some people have gone a little overboard, as I've heard from so many people that Prodigal is by far the best coffee roaster in the world. So that's why I think it might have been skewed a little bit by this. All right, Morgone at 17. And they were really high here. They were second place. So that's another huge drop from them. It's interesting how many of these top 10 coffee roasters have dropped as far as they have. Best coffee roasters in Australia are small and probably don't ship overseas. And that's why it's really nice that we have such an awesome Australian following that seems to keep us updated on what in Australia is really, really good. And I'm hoping that we'll either get a chance to go to Australia firsthand or more Australian coffee roasters will make themselves available in the United States or in Canada, because it's been interesting to see that the slow progression of Australian coffee roasters becoming more available around North America. Heart at 16. So I already knew that. I knew that they dropped from 10th to 16th. And that still seems a little high for me. I'm not entirely sure who's ranking them that high, but it's still an interesting placement for me. And now that I think on it, it's interesting. Roseline isn't on this list at all, though I haven't enjoyed my recent experiences with them. And Sweet Bloom, which is still an iconic name in coffee, was also not on this list. So some of these more well-known American coffee roasters are not very high on here. Archer's 15, and I could see it, honestly. And I'm just kind of looking at the comments here. Up and coming, okay, they're up and coming coffee roasters, but Archer's at 15. That's very exciting. They seem like wonderful people, so it's really nice to see them place as high as they did. That made me a little bit more curious and interested in that Pepe set, because the experience we had with them was mostly positive, so I wonder if those coffees also turn out to be pretty nice. Momos does not deserve 14th. And I was looking at that Momos placement, and it is an interesting placement for me. I feel like, so it's interesting. I will kind of spoil a little bit on this live stream. I am going to be reviewing one of their coffees side by side with another much smaller coffee roaster. So it's the same coffee. And I noticed that I enjoyed the coffee from the other coffee roaster significantly more than Momo's version of it. And the other coffees that we'd had from Momo's were a little bit more developed than I like. So it's a surprising placement for me. I'm wondering why it placed that high. All right, Doc at 13. That's an interesting placement. So I'll give Doc this much. They have both sides of things. They have the experimental and they have that standard stuff. So it's an interesting placement for me. I've had probably more Doc than any other coffee roaster on this list. And, they're probably somewhere in the top 50, maybe top 20 for me. 13, probably a tad high for me. Kawa at 12. That is a really interesting one to me. And I've heard from a number of people that Kawa is one of their favorite coffee roasters, but very much mixed reactions to some of their coffees we've had. Some of them have left me completely stumped, where I was just curious as to what we're going with for those coffees. Bright Hats at 11. Okay, I can see that. And Manhattan is just above them at 10. Fried Hats 11. That seems fair. I think that they're probably a top 15 coffee roaster. I've heard from some people that Fried Hats is actually a very good coffee roaster too. So I can see it. Have no problem with their placement on this list. Manhattan at 10, and I feel like Manhattan's going to be a very interesting one because 3 years ago, they are my undisputed favorite coffee roaster in the entire world. First place, obviously, Bermudez. Pepe Gijon, they introduced the coffee world to both of those coffees. They had the only version of both of those coffees, and it wasn't surprising that they were the best coffee roaster in the world at that time. Not only have I had much more mixed reactions to their coffees recently, but it's also been something I've heard from so many people that it's not necessarily the same as it has been in the past. So I don't really know where I would personally place them. I've only had a couple of their coffees since the transition because I'm still hoping and waiting for things to get sorted out with them a little better. But 10th does seem probably, I'm not entirely sure, honestly. I don't know where they belong right now. All right. Ona at 9. So that was already spoiled for me. And it's interesting hearing from people in Australia that they don't think Ona is necessarily that good. They're kind of living by name. But I'm wondering if maybe some of the rest of this top 10 is kind of living on name. And I can already see Rogers, Arkansas at number 8. So we know that that's going to be Onyx. And yep, it is Onyx at number 8. And does anybody still think Onyx is one of the 5 or 10 best coffee roasters in the world? That's kind of an interesting placement to me. I feel like if we're going back even further, like 6-7 years ago, you could make a very solid argument for them not only being in the top 10, but one of the best coffee roasters out there. It just seems like maybe they've stagnated a little bit. I'm not entirely sure. That is obviously very, very high for me. I don't know if I would place them even in my own. It's a top 25. I definitely wouldn't place them in my own top 25. Let's see here, Ona, the Onyx of All right, these comments are pretty funny, but let's keep moving on. All right, so Nomad at 7th. Okay, I'm this is the first one I think in the top 10 that I can feel very comfortable with because I've had pretty positive experiences with them recently. Every time I try them, it seems that I'm enjoying them more and more. They did have a coffee in our top 10 coffees last year, so that placement is it's probably fine for me. Kopi at 6, and I do remember that they finished last year. They finished 4th last year. And as mentioned, they're one of the most consistent coffee roasters out there. I don't think I have much of an issue with the 6th place placement, at least in terms of consistency, so that's fine with me. All right, I can see Le Cobra 5th, so let's go ahead and go through that one real quick. Le Cobra at 5th. Where did they finish last? They were 8th place last year. Okay, so they bumped up. That's interesting to me. I'm going to kind of ask that same question. Does anybody consider Le Cobra to be a top 5 coffee roaster out there? I've heard from one person that Le Cobra is still somewhat head and shoulders above so many other coffee roasters, but it's really surprising to me because not only have I had that personal reaction that Le Cobra isn't overly impressive for me, but I've heard that from coffee shop owners and a lot of people that have tried their coffee too. That's a really surprising placement for me. All right, Say at 4. I don't think too many people will have issue with Say being at number 4. If anything, I've actually enjoyed Say the more I've had them over my lifetime. So 4th place is fine. I know that they were 6th place last year. I think that they were the 2nd highest placing American coffee roaster. It looks like they're probably the highest placing American coffee roaster this year. I find most of their stuff baked. Their branding is better than their roasting. Yeah, I think if I'm being honest, both of those seem kind of true for Le Cobra. I'm actually working on a Le Cobra coffee too right now, so it's not as though I don't have recent experience with them either. It's a really, really high placement for me. Yeah, Say at 4. What I really like about Say is that they still seem to be innovative, even though they offer just so many wash processed coffees. They are the first to take chances on some very interesting and unique coffee. They keep very trendy too. I'm sure a lot of people probably see Say as their favorite coffee roaster or the best coffee roaster in the world. So I have no problem with their 4th place placement on here. All right, April at 3. I'm not entirely sure if April has, yeah, they weren't in the top 10 last year. Were they on the list last year at all? I don't recall whether or not they were on the top 50 list last year. But my recent experiences with April have been better, so I have enjoyed them. 3, there are some people I know that think April is still one of the best coffee roasters out there, and they seem like a huge pioneer in the Danish coffee scene. So 3rd place, it's probably somewhat justified. Let's see here. I love Le Cobra and at times blew my mind, but definitely have had some big misses. You know what? I will give them some credit in that sense. I've heard from people that some of their really high-end offerings are very good, but you can't be a coffee roaster that lives only on high-end offerings. Your standard offerings also have to be pretty good as well. 3, I like them, but 3 is pretty high. Yeah, I do like April. I probably wouldn't put them in my own personal top 10, but I can see why a number of people might have placed them very high. All right, let's keep moving on. And 2 is Coffee Collective. And where were they last year? They were 9. So that's interesting. I did kind of mention that a lot of these coffee roasters do have some brand name recognition. And that's kind of what this top 10 looks like is brand name recognition. So you have Coffee Collective, April, Say, Le Cobra, Kopi, maybe not quite as much, but Nomad, Onyx, Ona, like these are extremely big names. And I think that they might be living a little bit more on reputation as opposed to what they're actually doing. Specific coffee roasters, in my opinion, but places like Say, I feel like are justified. I do like Coffee Collective. I do like April. And that being said, I'm not entirely sure that either of them, maybe that's harsh on April, but Coffee Collective doesn't seem like it's kept up as much as modern coffee or a lot of the modern trends as coffees like Say or even Nomad. So that's a little surprising, the placement for me on them, though I do like Coffee Collective. So I wouldn't have an issue with them being on my own like, top 15 or so. 2nd place is maybe just a tad high. And that, of course, takes us to 1st place, which is Tim Wendelbo. And it was 1st place last year, and it's one of the only coffee roasters that didn't seem to get severely harshed by adding more panelists or severely hurt by adding more panelists to this list. So 1st place, I said last year that I can understand it. A lot of people say they're the best coffee roaster in the world, and they're maybe one of the most consistent coffee roasters in terms of experiences I've had. I would say that their floor for a coffee, if we're rating on a scale of 1 to 10, is like an 8. Like, I don't think I've ever had a coffee from them that I said was bad or even just okay. All of their coffees have been at the very least good. All right. We've been around for 45 minutes. I'll stick around for a couple of comments if people want to kind of give their own feedback. But missing the chemist. Let's see here. And Fisher Coffee. I've never heard of Fisher Coffee, or is it Fevi? Yeah, I can see why the picky chemist definitely does deserve to be on this list. There are a number of coffee roasters that deserve to be on this list as well. I'm wondering what some of the other snubs are, but the picky chemist is definitely one of them. Let's see here. I'm pretty new to your channel. Love the content. See a list of coffees you'll be reviewing soon. Yeah, I would love to find a way to do that, and I'm still trying to think of maybe a good idea. I've said in the past that one of the big issues with talking about or saying which coffees we're going to be reviewing is that we've scrapped reviews. We've actually scrapped a number of reviews. So I don't want to say that we're going to be reviewing a coffee only to scrap it. And there are just some other complications as well behind that. But I'm still working on figuring out a way to do that. Right. El Socorro Gesha was otherworldly good. Which coffee roaster was that one from, Michael? I'm kind of curious on that one. Was it Cabra or somebody else? Fisher is out of China. There's a coffee roaster from China that I'm working on currently that I actually really like. It's kind of nice and impressive. Fevi is from France, and I've heard a fair bit about some up-and-coming French coffee roasters too, so that's pretty exciting. No Colfea Circular in the top 50. I don't necessarily think that's surprising. I was fully expecting to talk about Colfea Circular a little further in depth, but I was surprised to see their placement on this list because I heard from some they weren't going to be on this list. I think maybe some people have some issues with just the company in general, and that's why they didn't place as high on this list, because I hear from people that they're the best coffee roaster in the world. For me, obviously, they're a top 3 coffee roasters, so I obviously think that they're snubbed in this top 50 list. I just think that, like the barn, there's some people that probably have some issues with the coffee roaster as a whole. What's the coffee roaster from China that you like? What is it? Is it Terraform? I think it's Terraform. So it's the one that was from the Coffee Vines April subscription box, and it's actually quite nice. Yes, it would be cool to see a list of your upcoming reviews. Yeah, definitely hoping to make that happen here sometime in the near future. I'm still trying to think of what other coffee roasters might have been snubbed on this list. But my own reaction, people were saying that this list was terrible, and I can kind of see it most because I have very mixed feelings on a lot of the top 10. So I have no problem with Tim Wendelboe. I have no problem with Say. I have no problem with Nomad. I don't really want to give too much of a reaction to the rest of the, like Manhattan, I'm not sure. I've never tried Ona, so I have to be honest that I don't really have an opinion on that. Onyx, obviously not necessarily for me. Kopi, I think it's fine. La Cabra, I don't agree with. April, it seems somewhat justified. Same thing with Coffee Collective. For me personally, not, but that's just kind of my overall reaction to top 10. So I can see why people might have had a lot of issues with this list. Michael, April. So yeah, I can see it. April for that. And Leuchtfeuer, that is definitely a huge snub. I would love to see the full list of what people voted for. I do wonder if there are any coffee roasters that, a lot of these coffee roasters like Hydrangea or Moonwake or Leuchtfeuer that people might have voted for in their like top 10, top 5 that didn't get enough votes to justify a placement on the top 100 list. I imagine if they did, then maybe they would have at least made the list itself. Rogue Wave, JBC, S&W. I didn't even think about S&W, and I haven't tried their coffees yet, so I don't know if I have a reaction to that. Rogue Wave, it probably does deserve to be in the top 100. There are some coffee roasters I've looked at on here, and I'm like, I think that's probably a little unjustified. Any interesting roasters from Taiwan? Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I have pretty limited familiarity with Taiwanese coffee roasters. There's one I'm working on that I wouldn't necessarily suggest, mostly because it was a little darker than I was expecting, but hopefully more in the future. Do more lives? I would actually love to. This is actually a lot of fun. You guys are awesome. Let's see here. Only Simple Kaffa from Taiwan in top 100. Yeah, and I'm wondering if maybe people just haven't been exposed to a lot of Taiwanese coffee roasters. So hoping maybe we can get some more reviews there. Top 100 alphabetically is under the top 50 list. Yeah, we actually went through that initially, and I saw some of the coffee roasters that I didn't agree with being in that top 100, and we're mostly kind of discussing some of the snubs that were left off that top 100. Opinion on half the coffee roasters when they aren't available for people in other countries. Yeah, and that's really unfortunate too, because I hear from a lot of people overseas that they can't get some of these American coffee roasters. Believe it or not, there are a lot of people that struggle to get Say in other countries because the shipping is too expensive. So they never had an opportunity to try Say, which is probably the most sought after American coffee roaster for people overseas as well. So it's very unfortunate. I think it's nice that I actually have an extensive bit of familiarity with so many of these coffee roasters. That's why I can kind of formulate an opinion on them. Yes, more lives. I would definitely love to do more of those. Let's see here. TU Oasis single origin. Yeah. Can you elaborate on that, Chewy Mouse? I've tried some sample from Apollon's Gold and Say love them both. Is there any other roaster recommendations similar to that? Similar to them, I feel like most people then would probably say the Picky Chemist because they're skewing on that very light side of things. Along that same realm, Substance is also there. I've never tried Substance, so I can't say for myself. But usually when I hear those two coffee roasters, they're in the same breath. Like people that love the Picky Chemist and Substance are the type of people that tend to enjoy those really light coffees. Luckily, there are sometimes multi-roasters which carry Say in Europe. That makes things that makes things easier. Taiwan coffee roasters I liked. Noon and Bean Barn a bit darker. Okay, and so that makes sense to Oasis. And I thought the name of the coffee roaster Single Origin. It's an interesting name for a coffee roaster. All right, and you know what? We'll probably close the stream around 8 more minutes or so. So around 7 p.m. my time, 10 p.m. Yeah, this was actually a lot of fun. Not sure that there's anything on here that's necessarily stood out too much from the rest of this list. Do you have a way for viewers to send you coffee? I've thought about that before. I've wondered if I wanted to do a PO box, but I think the tricky thing has always been that I don't review free coffee. So I always make sure to pay for the coffee that I purchase from coffee roasters because I've had way too many coffee roasters reach out and ask to send me samples and review those samples or review those coffees. And I refuse to because that seems like conflict of interest. Even if they want me to be honest, I still don't feel comfortable like that. So I do wonder if maybe accepting it from viewers, subscribers might be a little different than that. When come back to LA to try cafes. Oh man, that'd be a lot of fun. I would love to do all the way from Sacramento down to, there's a coffee roaster. What is it called? I think it's Scorpio. There's a coffee roaster that's pretty north in California. I would love to drive all the way down from California, from Sacramento to San Diego and try as many coffee roasters as I can. Let's see. I really appreciate your policy doing that. Really makes it feel like your opinions are unbiased. They are as much as they can be. Like there are some coffee roasters that obviously I just enjoy a little bit more than others because they seem like really good people. And I try to make that as obvious as possible if there's any sort of bias. But it's twofold. Support the business as well because I do strongly believe in supporting coffee businesses. But at the same time, I don't want it to cause any conflict of interest. 20-gram tubes only. Yeah, that would make for really fun blind taste test, actually, getting all these different tubes and trying all of these different coffees from people. I've thought about that before as well. Kind of aside the list, but thoughts on Newground UK had 2 isolated instances and was underwhelmed both. I think I've tried one of their coffees, so I don't have enough familiarity. I don't even really remember it well enough to give an opinion on that. Let's see here. Getting free coffee to review is really just a roaster getting a free consultation. I suppose I it might still get a little too overwhelming from the amount of coffee roasters that are reaching out to me. The channel is essentially a mix of three things. It's a mix of coffee roasters that I'm interested in, coffee roasters that are directly suggested to me, and I think that's actually probably the only two things it's a mix of. But I don't want to get that kind of muddled by reviewing a bunch of coffees from places that are essentially kind of I don't really know how to say that. They're just getting in the way of what you guys want us to review and what I personally want to review as well. Surprised how light they were, though. Okay, well, I'm wondering if maybe we should try some more new ground coffee then. The topic of Sweet Bloom, I've had a lot of their coffees recently, and sadly, they haven't gotten better. You know, I never expected to get them for them to get as big as they did. It's really surprising anytime I go to Denver to see just how many of their cafes they are and how nice their cafes are. I'm not entirely sure why they went the direction that they did. I heard from people that usually when somebody goes with alluring, they tend to go a lot lighter. And that's why it was surprising to me that they went the opposite direction and decided to push their coffees a little more after switching to alluring. So yeah, it's not surprising, I guess, anymore, but given how many of these coffee roasters are on this list based off of reputation, I imagine that maybe a place like Sweet Bloom might also be on here for reputation. A little bit of background noise as well. All right, a couple more minutes here. Oh, now I'm looking at Single Low. I had one of their coffees in Tokyo at the cafe, which was kind of nice. How much coffee do you drink per day? It is between 4 to 6 cups usually, but there are days where if I might have purchased too much coffee, I end up doing somewhere between 6 to 8. It used to be 6 to 8 on weekends every single weekend day. Speaking of which, I do need a cup of coffee right now. It's been probably a couple of hours since I've had a cup of coffee. Do you get palate fatigue? I would say so. I think it's usually when I'm drinking too many coffees per day, it ends up, I'd say, making it makes it difficult sometimes when I know there's a coffee that I haven't liked up to that point and I have to take notes on it. It makes it a little difficult to justify making and drinking that coffee. So it can get a little tricky at times. Why are most decafs from Colombia? I have no idea, honestly. And I feel like maybe part of that is because Colombia seems to be the origin that's experimenting the most. And a lot of these decafs are coming from producers that like to experiment as well. Wilton Benitez obviously comes to mind. So I think, am I wrong? Does Diego Bermudez have a decaf as well? I think that, yeah, just Colombian producers really love experimenting with their coffees. Oh yeah, El Paraiso decaf. I believe I'd seen that before. I think Manhattan might have offered it. Where the main decapitation facilities are. It could be. They recently had an Ethiopian decaf. That's kind of interesting. All right, and I'm probably going to go after this comment from Muhammad. Let's see. Colombia is one of the few places in the world they can have facilities to make decaf. Other parts of the world just that makes a lot of sense. All right, I'll actually answer this one last question from Chris. So this is a question I get asked all the time. What grinder? So as much as Brian absolutely hates not only the DF grinders, I have a DF64 and I have the SSP multi-purpose burrs, which I know Brian hates absolutely both. So yeah, I have both, even though Brian absolutely hates them, mostly because it was suggested to me by somebody I was working on the grinder with. So that's what we ended up going with, which is always funny when Brian says so many negative things about both things. And water recipe do you normally use? So my water is extremely soft. So Colfea Circular's brew guide is the 10 to 50 TDS water. So it's extremely soft water. And I decided to filter the water, which was already soft that I had. So it was like around 30 TDS. And it ends up being somewhere between that 20 to 30 range, mostly because it makes Coffea Circularis coffees taste really, really good. And that's why every time I use that water with maybe more developed coffees, I feel like the water kind of ruins those things. And people have said that it doesn't really work for a number of coffee roasters. So I know that I should probably tinker with water a little bit more, but that it works really well for a number of coffee roasters. That's the main reason why I haven't branched out as much. All right, that's it. It's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and go for now. But thank you, everybody, for joining. This was actually so much fun. And I'm not entirely sure when we'll live stream again because I'm not entirely sure what else we might have to live stream. So this was great, and I will talk to you all later.